Hey everyone, and welcome to the Boston Allbug Podcast, episode 2 of the Quarantine Edition. Now, we have a jam-packed show for this one because yesterday was the World Car Awards, which would have happened and took place in New York, but thanks to the pandemic and what's been going on, we had to just do that on live streaming, which was still pretty fun considering the circumstances over the last 2 or 3 weeks. It's great to have something to talk about finally and really get excited for. So the nominees, the finalists, and even the winners, they're all really interesting cars that make you question and think that maybe there is a power shift in the automotive industry heading into this next decade, as some of the cars that won you wouldn't consider to be at the top of their class or top of their segment. So very, very interesting. We're going to get into that. And then finally, we're going to get into the Mk8 GTI, because one of the finalists, in my opinion, if the brand decided to put in a better motor, more powerful engine, and maybe add some modification stuff, or if other companies would be willing to chip in for aftermarket parts, I think it would be a perfect contender to the Mk8 GTI. So we're going to get into that, and let's just have some fun. Now, diving right into the World Car Awards for 2020, the Kia Telluride took home the best car of the year. It was up against the Mazda3 and the Mazda CX-30, which was surprising because the Mazda3 and the CX-30 are basically the same car. It's just that the CX-30 is a crossover version. It's built on the same platform. But to have both Kia and Mazda at the top of this list and to be the finalists really speaks volumes about where these brands are going. Now, Mazda, they have been doing this for over the last 5 years, where they've really emphasized being on the more luxury side of things. So when you step inside, their interiors are more luxurious, they're nicer. I think also the materials they use is definitely a step up from some of their competitors. And with the Mazda CX-30, I can attest, it's really a great car. It really truly is. And I think it's going to be very popular once the market gets back in, up and running. But it was definitely a car that raised eyebrows, and to me, I certainly liked it, especially for its segment of being in a subcompact crossover market. Now, the Kia Telluride, I have not experienced it yet on the road, nor have I filmed a review on one. But what Kia has done over the last 2 to 3 years has really changed our perceptions towards Korean automakers. And actually, this was the first time ever in the World Car Awards history that a Korean brand took home this award. Now, the Kia Telluride, from what I understand, now I've talked to a few dealers, they can't even get these in and keep them on inventory. People are buying them literally once they get off the truck. And it's really interesting to hear that because, the dealership I work with for the Kia Stinger, they told me that with the Kia Telluride and the Kia Seltos, that people are just walking right in before they were even on the market, even being on the inventory. They were coming in, ordering them, speccing them out at the dealer, and then they wait for them to be shipped in. Now, I've never heard of that before from a brand of like Kia's caliber. Usually you hear that with Porsche, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, but never a brand like Kia. So that really speaks a lot of volumes. But the vehicle, the Kia Telluride and also its cousin, the Hyundai Palisade, both are great vehicles. Both are great 3-row passenger crossovers and are certainly changing the game in how we perceive these markets, how we perceive non-luxury brands. Because I honestly think Kia, Hyundai, and Mazda, which I think it's pretty ironic that at least 2 out of the 3 were put in this category, they're making some great strides. And in my opinion, they're going to be brands to watch out for heading through this decade. I think Mazda's making some great moves right now. Their interiors are better than what Honda and Toyota are putting out. And what we're going to lead into later on in this video, the Mazda 3, in my opinion, when it comes to overall, now we're going to subtract and take away the performance aspect for a minute, the Mazda 3 hatchback might be the best vehicle in its segment. Now, moving on to the best luxury car of the year, this is where I think the World Car Awards voting criteria and biases really come into play. And we start seeing it more from a global perspective rather than the United States. So the finalists were the Porsche Taycan, Porsche 911, and also the Mercedes-Benz EQC. Now, the Porsche Taycan won. Actually, that was one of 2 awards it won this year. And I have to say, when you start looking at what it was up against, I don't know if I'd put the Porsche Taycan as being the best luxury car on the market, especially where I have sat in one. Driving is a whole different story. Not even people who work at Porsche dealerships right now have fully experienced this car. But when it comes to the interior aspect, I'm a bit skeptical on that. I wasn't a big fan. I think it could have been a lot better. Porsche's interiors of right now have been a little interesting because I know that a lot of people miss the old layout with all the buttons and more of that like fighter jet cockpit style. And I think that it was really a step back. The Mercedes-Benz EQC, not even available in the United States. It was delayed till 2021 due to some battery issues, I think, when it came to manufacturing them and having enough for supply and demand. On top of that, I think it's been delayed probably till 2022 at this point, thanks to what's been going on this year. But we don't have any access to that car, so we don't even know if it's a really good crossover at all. Now, the finalists that got cut were the BMW X5 and also the BMW X7, which I think the X5 and X7 are great options. I'm surprised they got cut. And actually, I'm really surprised the Porsche 911 even made it on that list. The Porsche 911 is a great car. It's a great driver's car. But when it comes to overall luxury, and when you consider luxury as being really fitting as many people as you possibly can, I'm kind of surprised the 911 even made it onto the final three. Now, some of the finalists, though, were, or candidates, were the BMW Z4, Cadillac CT5, which I wouldn't put the CT5 there, XT6, Mercedes-Benz GLE, Mercedes-Benz GLS, and surprisingly, the Toyota Supra. Now, the Toyota Supra doesn't even belong in this list, although you could make the argument it's a BMW, so you might as well put it on there because most of these brands are basically German brands except for Cadillac. But when you look at the candidates, you look at the finalists, you look at who won, I think when you start looking at the options, then the Porsche Taycan does make sense. But again, I do think the World Car Awards does skewer their voting criteria towards electric cars. Whereas in the United States, I think a number of those cars on that list would have probably been the finalists and probably could have won. I think in the United States, if it was just a United States voting system, the Porsche 911 would have won hands down. Now for the best performance car of the year, the Porsche Taycan wins again, going up against its siblings, the Porsche 911 and the Porsche Cayman GT4. Now, before we get into the finalists and the candidates for this market, Porsche really was a top brand for this year. They weren't even in the list for the finalists last year for best performance car. And when you look at what Porsche has done with their entire lineup, Porsche Taycan now provides an electric car alternative. They're going to start moving towards electric cars heading throughout this decade. But they now have a car that goes up against Tesla. They have the Macan, the Cayenne, they have the Panamera, they have the 911, and the Cayman GT4, and just the regular Cayman and Boxster. They have a lineup that really speaks to a lot of consumers, not only car enthusiasts, but now just regular consumers as well, who would have maybe bought a Mercedes-Benz or Audi. Now, just like with Mazda and Kia, Porsche is making some great strides. Porsche, in my opinion, would really not be considered a mainstream luxury brand just because of when you consider BMW, Audi, and Mercedes-Benz, those are top three brands in terms of sales. Where now that Porsche has a very big portfolio, a very extensive lineup that provides, four doors, that provides performance and practicality in numerous ways, they're now being a brand that you could say is becoming mainstream because they're not only drawing in enthusiasts now, but regular consumers. So Porsche's making a lot of strides. I'm looking forward to seeing what they come out with throughout this decade. But just like with Kia and Mazda, that's another brand. Porsche is another brand to watch out for. Now, some of the candidates and the finalists were the BMW M8. Now, I'm a big fan of the BMW M8. I think it's an amazing car. What BMW has done with that car is truly remarkable. You also had the Toyota Supra again. Now, this was the only Toyota that was even being considered for any awards. Now, like I said, the Toyota Supra is basically a BMW, so why not put it out there? But I think, and I think a lot of journalists understand this, even consumers as well, consumers more so than journalists, but the Toyota Supra is not a bad car. In fact, it's a great car. It's a fun car. And people could say, well, this is a BMW, but when you look at the sales, it actually was probably more successful than a lot of people thought. Considering the fact that it did not have a 2JZ engine, it didn't have a manual transmission, I think the Supra really overachieved and really did well for itself in the first year of production. So I think a lot of people are too harsh on the car. I think the Supra is really a great enthusiast car for 2020. And seeing the success that Toyota has with it, I think Toyota can build off of that car. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Toyota has in store as well, because they're going to start coming out with maybe another MR2 or Celica with collaboration with Subaru. So it's very interested seeing how that all works out. Also with another GT86 as well. Very, very interested. And then moving on to some of the candidates, you had the Audi RS6 Avant, Audi RS7 Sportback, Audi S8, Audi SQ8, BMW Z4, Mercedes-Benz AMG A35 and A45, and also the Mercedes-Benz AMG CLA and CLA 35 and 45. Now, Audi is what's really been the eye-opener, because they had quite a lot of candidates for this segment. And I really love what Audi and Porsche are doing right now. They're coming out with some awesome cars, Audi more so than Porsche, because Audi, they're always looked at as being the third fiddle. They're always looked at as being behind Mercedes-Benz and BMW. But I love Audi's new interiors. I like what they're coming out with right now. The cars I've experienced so far are really awesome, really cool. Their design is great. I love the design of their new cars, such as the S4, but also their other RS6 or RS and S models. Really looking forward to checking them out later this year, hopefully. Keep my fingers crossed that we can actually get back to work soon. But I'm really looking forward to checking those cars out. I think Audi is making some great strides. And in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I prefer it over what Mercedes-Benz is doing right now. I think on the lower end, Mercedes-Benz might have an advantage with the CLA and A-Class. But overall, when it comes to the entire brand, I really like Audi over Mercedes-Benz. BMW, I'm a BMW fanboy, so I always look at BMW as being a pretty awesome brand with a great lineup. Now, the last award that really caught my eye was the 2020 World Car Design of the Year. And that award went out to the Mazda3 hatchback, or the Mazda3. And I have to say, if it had a better engine, the Mazda3 would be the most popular hatchback in the United States in 2020. And the reason why I say it is because it has a great interior, very high quality, very upscale for its price. You also have a great exterior, and you have the optional all-wheel drive system. So for right around $30,000, you could walk out of a dealer with a top trim Mazda 3, which really is incredible considering what it's up against. Now, the Mazda 3, I think you could make the argument was, or really has had the best interior for a very long time. Like around 2015, 2016, when Mazda came out with the refreshed designs, their interiors were very high quality. And you could definitely, say it has a better interior than the Honda Civic at the time. Now, in my opinion, the Honda Civic had a great interior back in 2015, 2016. And now I'm a bit skeptical on that. I think Honda is rather a disappointing brand in 2020, especially when you consider it to be a top-selling brand that goes up against Toyota. I'd still put Toyota at the top of the list. Honda just isn't doing enough for me to make me think that it's really a top brand when it comes to overall design, overall interior quality. I just wouldn't put Honda at the top of the list. But Mazda, being really a non-mainstream brand, is really making you consider the Mazda brand itself to be in the same category, at least in the same sentence, as Acura, as Lexus, just because of where they're going. The leathers that they use, the leather materials that they use are pretty top-notch. And what Mazda is doing overall is just really eye-opening and definitely something to look out for heading throughout this decade. Now, this leads me right into the Mk8. Now, I've been dying to talk about this, and I've been trying to figure out why the Mk8 to me is such a disappointing car, even though I haven't experienced it yet. Is it the exterior? Is it the interior? Is it really the minimal gains in terms of performance? And the Mazda 3 really brought this out to me. Seeing the Mazda 3 win this award really makes me understand exactly why I don't like the new Mk8 GTI. Now, as I've said numerous times in this podcast, if the Mazda 3 had a better engine, if Mazda came out with a Speed 3, if they went in that direction, I think Mazda could give Volkswagen a run for its money in the hatchback segment. Because in my opinion, the Mk8 GTI is a product of a lack of competition in the segment. No one is going up against Volkswagen right now. You could make the argument that, well, you have the Hyundai Veloster N, you have the Hyundai Veloster, you have a few options, but I in terms of sales, and Volkswagen knows this, in terms of sales, Hyundai will never outcompete, outsell Volkswagen. They know that. And now that Ford doesn't have the ST in the United States anymore, doesn't even have the Focus anymore, overall, there really is no competition. So the Mk8 GTI, in my opinion, is just a vehicle that is a facelift, an overall facelift for the Mark 7.5 or the Mark 7 generation, because it's still built on the MQB platform. It's just an overall refresh. There's nothing different. There's nothing really, anything that would make me say that this is a completely different car. And I've heard numerous Volkswagen GTI owners say that it's evolutionary, rather revolutionary, and I wouldn't even say it's evolutionary because there's really not much different. Now you could walk into the interior and say, well, you have a bigger screen, you have a digital display, you have, a different center console. But the digital display was offered in Europe, so we could have had that on the Mark 7 and Mark 7.5. The bigger touchscreen isn't really something that is that exciting. If I'm buying a Mk8 GTI for a bigger touchscreen and more technology, then I'm buying it for all the wrong reasons. The Mark 7.5 GTI or the GTI in general is really a fun performance car that's practical, and it's also affordable. It's a great overall car for any enthusiast, any driver. The Mk8 GTI, on the other hand, I don't even think it's worth upgrading to, because when you look at 242 horsepower, I think it has somewhere around 276 pound-feet of torque. I have to look at that again. But, other than the torque numbers, I'm not really excited about this car, because you could just stage one tune a Mark 7.5 or a Mark 7 GTI and have close to 300 horsepower. You have more horsepower, more torque, and you saved like $20,000 or, $28,000, by not buying a new car. So, in my opinion, I just don't like the Mk8 GTI from an overall perspective. And when you look at other options, if Mazda had decided to come out with a better engine, a more powerful engine, I think consumers would definitely start looking at Mazda as being a legitimate contender. But overall for the Mk8, when it comes to its exterior, I think it's lagging compared to the Mark 7.5. That lower portion of the front grille looks awful, in my opinion. That dice-looking LED light setup on the back. It looks like I rolled two fives up front, and it just does not look that great. The lack of the plastic cladding. Now, I'm not a big fan of plastic cladding, but because there's a lack of it, it doesn't look very aggressive anymore. It does have a bigger lower grille, but up front, it just looks less aggressive. It's like they went in the wrong direction. The only thing I do like, though, is that when you look at the headlights, you look at the videos of this car rolling down the road, all four lights for the headlights are illuminated, which, as you guys know, if you are a Mark 7 GTI owner and you're an OCD person like myself, you can't stand the fact that the inner lights don't light up at all. They're just there. They're not functional. I'm glad to see that at least Volkswagen made all the lights functional and illuminated, which at least that's one thing I can take away and say, well, that's a positive from the Mark 7 and 7.5 generation. And then moving on to the interior, you have your digital display along with the bigger infotainment system. Hopefully it's optional for the US, which is the mood lighting, which I think adds a great atmosphere at night driving. For night driving, looks really cool. And then the center console is a lot different as well, with a gear shift lever that I believe comes out of the Porsche 911. So if I was to buy the car, I'd feel pretty good that the gear shift lever comes out of a Porsche, and even though I can't afford one, there's at least some part sharing between Audi, Porsche, and Volkswagen that I feel pretty good about, because the digital display would be more of a dumbed down version of Audi's virtual cockpit. So I feel pretty good, although I still think that it's unnecessary to have this technology in the car, because the Volkswagen GTI is a driver's car. But again, I think to really bring it up to 21st century or even 2020 standards, having a digital display makes sense. But where I really wish that Volkswagen focused on more was the overall interior quality, because you can just tell by the photos that it's not as nice as some of the competitors out there. Now, again, I still harp on the Mazda3 hatchback, because I think if we had a Mazda3 hatchback-like design or interior quality for the Mk8 GTI, it would be the best car ever. If you just combined its performance and the Mazda's interior, I think it would just be the ultimate car at $35,000. And unfortunately, we're not going to get that. I think Volkswagen is going to cut corners on the interior quality, and it is what it is. And like I said before, it's really a byproduct of a lack of competition. Volkswagen obviously doesn't need to go all out. They don't need to go and spend extra money on things they don't need, especially when Hyundai is not going to compete against them. Ford does not have the Focus ST anymore, and Mazda, at least for the time being, is not going to have any performance version of the hatchback. So why should Volkswagen go all in and invest everything into this car to make it the ultimate hatchback? So I can totally see why Volkswagen didn't go in that direction, but I think overall it's just a very disappointing car. But I'm gonna wait and see. I want to experience the car first before I go crazy and become way too critical. So guys, let me know in the comment section below if you like the Mk8 GTI, or are you going to wait and reserve your judgment for when you get to drive it? Because that's something I kind of want to do as well. I want to see if it's a better driving car than the Mark 7 7.5. I think the minimal gains in terms of performance isn't going to make much of a difference. Although in the mid 270 range for torque for a car that size and weight, I think it's going to be pretty quick. So I think when it comes to driving aspect, it's going to be a lot better than what it looks like. And even the interior, I think the interior could be a little bit better. But again, there's not much out there when you're looking at competition or other options. So the Mk8 GTI will still remain it and still retain its title of being the best hatchback in its segment. But I do think though that if Mazda decided to come out with the bigger engine and come out with the performance version of the Mazda3 hatchback, that I think Mazda could give Volkswagen a run for its money. But that's a hypothetical, and I don't know if we're ever going to see that from Mazda moving forward. Now, also let me know what you think about the World Car Awards. Do you agree that the Kia Telluride was the best car of the year? And also the Porsche Taycan. Is it the best luxury and performance car of the year? Now, when it comes to performance, I still would put the Porsche 911 out there just because it's a more driver's car. The Taycan, it's an electric car. It doesn't have that aspect that gears of going through the gears and hearing the acceleration and the roar of the engine. You do get that weird Jetson noise, but I don't know. I'd still put the 911 up there. And then even for luxury car, I think Audis could most certainly deserve that title. So, just let me know what you guys think. Definitely interesting the way the World Car Awards are voted upon, how their voting criteria is. But this year, for sure, was a lot better than last year's finals and last year's winners. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more. But more importantly, stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll see you guys next time.